Welcome back to this short second video where we're looking at safety cases. We previously talked about the King's Cross disaster, the fire in 1987. So what we were discussing was foreseeable doesn't necessarily mean that it's predictable, because no one can predict the exact moment that an incident's going to happen. But because the conditions that made it possible had been developing unchecked, then it was considered foreseeable. But what the people involved managing that risk didn't have was a living understanding of the risk. And if they, it's easy with 2020 hindsight, but perhaps if they had stepped back every year and said, what's changed? Are we relying on any assumptions, and are they still valid? And what happens if those assumptions are wrong? It might have been a different story. Now, if we think that the likelihood of an incident, we assess a certain likelihood, but actually we're saying, well, the severity is quite low. So in this case with King's Cross, whilst there'd been 46 fires, nobody had been injured from those fires. So likelihood fairly relatively high, whatever the scale is on the right hand side of this graph, but the severity was assessed as quite low. Now, if we haven't understood the hazard, inevitably we're going to assess that risk incorrectly. And the trap that a lot of people fall into is assessing the likelihood of, or the severity, I beg your pardon, as being low, which means that the measures you put in place are likely to be insufficient. Whereas if we assess the severity as high and the likelihood is quite high, well then clearly we're going to put better, more robust controls in place to try and reduce the likelihood of that event happening. Now, the belief that risk is low is often determined as the reason why accidents actually happen. And I just want to explore for a minute why we actually believe risk to be low. And there's various reasons. One of those is groupthink. And this is a psychological phenomenon where we, as humans, we have desire for harmony or conformity in a group. And this results in dysfunctional decision making. So what does that mean in practice? It means teams will perhaps ignore alternative viewpoints to maintain a consensus. It means that dissent is not encouraged, and any warning signs might be downplayed to preserve that unity. So real world examples of this are the NASA's Challenger and Columbia shuttle disasters, where engineers raised concerns, but decision makers, for certain reasons, carried on. Then, of course, unknowns or lack of competence. So a lack of critical knowledge, lack of skills or understanding of the scenarios. Now that could be due to systemic weaknesses in training, hiring, knowledge sharing, education. So what does that mean in practice? Overconfidence, but perhaps with limited expertise. Poor risk assessment because we've got missing information, misunderstood systems or technology. Chernobyl could be a real-world example of this, where the operational crew actually lacked sufficient understanding of the reactor's safety design. And finally, in our triangle, we have confirmation bias, where we favour information that confirms our existing beliefs or decisions. So what does that look like? We might dismiss reports or data that challenge the current plan, the current way of thinking. We might rationalise early warning signs. Oh yes, well that's just always happens, that's very normal. The earlier fires in King's Cross, where nothing bad has happened, so there's this comfortable feeling that nothing bad will happen. The building has stood here for 60 years, therefore it's fine. Have you heard that recently? A real-world example is the Boeing 737 MAX crisis. Internal warnings were overlooked or dismissed because acknowledging them might have slowed production. So in our next short video, we're going to talk about how that relates to safety cases.